The spotlights of New York Fashion Week pierced Ella Cole's retinas like red-hot needles. She stood at the end of the runway, clad in her graduation collection, centerpiece a white embroidered gown titled Heritage. The blue cornflowers hand-stitched onto the skirt were crafted using the American country embroidery techniques her grandmother had taught her. The pearl buttons at the neckline were vintage finds her grandmother had bought at a Manhattan department store in 1950. Even the lace lining was salvaged from the attic of her grandmother's tailor shop. Yet now, this labor of love, months of blood, sweat, and memories had become an object of public scorn. Plagiarist, worthless thief, a man in a custom-tailored suit stood up from the front row, yelling as he held up a fashion magazine. On its cover was Olivia Payne, chief designer at Starlight Group, showcasing her latest collection. One gowns, silhouette, embroidery pattern, and even the placement of its pearl buttons were identical to the dress Ella wore. Boos and jeers flooded the venue. Someone hurled a coffee cup onto the runway. Brown liquid splattered across Ella's pristine skirt, leaving a grotesque stain. She tried to speak, to pull out the design sketches and video footage of her embroidery process hidden in her pocket, but a stagehand rushed over, roughly yanking the microphone from her hand and dragging her backstage. "Let go of me. That's my design. Olivia stole it from me." Ella struggled, her nails digging red marks into the stagehand's arm. In the backstage hallway, she collided with Olivia. Once, this woman had spent every day with her in Parsons School of Design studios, sharing fabric swatches and vowing, "We'll take New York's fashion scene by storm together." Now, Olivia wore a five-figure Chanel suit, diamond studs glinting at her ears, flanked by four assistants every inch, the fashion tyrant. "Ella, what a shame." Olivia's voice dripped with sickly sweetness, but her eyes were as cold as shards of ice. "I thought you'd be the most promising of our class. Why'd you have to take this low road? Copying my designs, are you that desperate for fame?" Ella's hands trembled with rage as she pulled a stack of sketches from her pocket. "These are my designs. Dated last March. Look, I have videos of me embroidering at my grandma's shop. Every stitch is documented. You borrowed my design notebook last week, said you wanted to give me feedback. You stole it." Olivia chuckled, then signaled to an assistant, who handed over a notebook. It was Ella's, her grandmother's photo, still taped to the cover. Olivia flipped slowly to the last page, where Ella's signature was scrawled. Next to it, in an almost identical hand, were the words, "I authorize Olivia Payne to modify and use this design." "Yeah, Cole." "Steal." Olivia tossed the notebook back at Ella. "This is authorization. We're best friends, aren't we? Your inspiration is my inspiration. Besides, who'd believe the granddaughter of a Brooklyn tailor could create something this sophisticated?" Ella's chest tightened with agony. 3 days earlier, Olivia had wept, claiming her father was gravely ill and needed expensive medical care. She'd begged to borrow Ella's designs for Starlight Group's internal competition. Ella had softened, handing over her notebook, and even teaching Olivia how to embroider the cornflower petals. It had all been a lie. "One more thing I forgot to mention." Olivia leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "That little Cole's tailor shop your grandma left you, I took care of it. You owed 3 months' rent. I paid it off. In exchange, the deed to the shop. Starting tomorrow, it'll be Starlight Group's vintage-style flagship experience store. I'm sure your grandma would be proud if she were alive." The words struck Ella like a poisoned dagger. That tiny shop on 8th Avenue in Brooklyn, her grandmother had run it from 1948 until her death. It held her grandma's sewing machine, cutting table, decades of customer orders pinned to the walls, even Ella's childhood doodles of dresses. It was her last link to the woman who'd raised her. "Olivia, you'll regret this." Ella's voice cracked, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Olivia pulled out a handkerchief, dabbing at her sleeve as if Ella's tears had contaminated it. "Regret. In New York fashion, only winners get to talk about regret. You're just too naive, did you really think sentiment would get you anywhere?" With that, she turned on her heel, her assistants swarming around her like sycophantic crows. Ella watched her go, fists clenched so tight her nails drew blood. In that moment, the Ella who'd naively believed talent would conquer all died. What remained was a avenger, determined to take back everything that had been stolen from her. Ella was expelled from Parsons for academic dishonesty. No diploma, no letters of recommendation, and with the plagiarist label hanging over her head, every fashion house in New York slammed its doors in her face. She was too afraid to return to Brooklyn to see her grandmother's shop transformed into something unrecognizable. So, she'll hold up in a cheap Manhattan motel, her only cash being the $500 her grandmother had left her before passing. That night, she saw Olivia on the motel's communal TV, wearing the stolen heritage gown. Olivia wept to the interviewer about spending countless nights perfecting the design. Inspired by her grandmother's country embroidery, she displayed forged sketches and fake behind-the-scenes footage of the gown's creation. The host praised her as brilliant and true to her roots, while Starlight Group CEO announced plans to launch an eponymous luxury line for her. The TV's glow illuminated Ella's face. She didn't cry. She simply turned off the screen, packed her bags, and knew she had to go back to Brooklyn. Even if the shop was gone, she needed to see the place that had held 3 generations of her family's memories. Next morning, Ella stood at the intersection of 8th Avenue and 55th Street, where the wooden Kohl's Tailor Shop sign had hung for decades. A glossy Olivia Vintage Experience sign now gleamed. In the floor-to-ceiling windows, mannequins wore embroidered pieces eerily similar to her designs priced at exorbitant rates. She pushed open the glass door, only to be stopped by a uniformed clerk. "Sorry, we only serve appointment-only clients," the clerk said, eyeing Ella up and down with disdain. "I'm here to see the owner," Ella replied. "The owner is Ms. Olivia Payne. She's not in today. Do you have an appointment?" Ella didn't argue. She turned and laughed. Around the corner, she spotted a familiar figure, old George, a longtime customer of her grandmother's and a carpenter in the Brooklyn community. When George saw her, he sighed. "Ella, you're finally back. The day they took your grandma's shop, I tried to beg them to stop, but they wouldn't listen." "George, do you know what happened to her things?" Ella asked. George shook his head. "Most of it got thrown out, but I snuck your grandma's old Singer sewing machine into my garage. Some fabric and tools, too. I figured you might come back for them someday." Ella followed George to his garage. There, covered in dust but intact, was the black Singer, a 1953 wedding gift from her grandmother's husband. The pedal and needle still worked. Next to it were rolls of burlap, denim, and her grandmother's treasured embroidery threads, stored in a tin cookie jar. "Thank you, George," Ella said, running her hand over the machine's cold metal. Tears finally fell. "Kid, don't lose heart," George patted her shoulder. "Your grandma had it harder than this when she opened the shop. She always said, a good tailor doesn't need a fancy store, just a steady hand and a stubborn spirit." That night, Ella cleaned the rust off the Singer with gasoline and oiled the needle. When she pressed the pedal, it hummed to life, click-clack, click-clack, the same rhythm she'd heard as a child in the tailor shop. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her bag and sketched her first design, a burlap work dress. With the Brooklyn Bridges silhouette embroidered on the skirt and a belt made from recycled leather, she couldn't afford new fabric. So she scoured Brooklyn's thrift stores for old clothes, altering ill-fitting jeans into shorts, tearing worn shirts into fabric scraps, and piecing them into new designs. She launched a social media account called Brooklyn Mender, posting videos of her upcycling process and photos of the finished pieces. At first, only a few neighbors followed her. Then, she transformed a 1990s denim jacket, embroidering Brooklyn Tough across the back and adding her grandmother's brass buttons. A local New York fashion blogger shared the photo, and overnight, her account gained 10,000 followers. Messages poured in from people asking for custom pieces. Her first client was a single mom who wanted a birthday dress for her daughter. With a budget of just $100, Ella used a thrifted white tulle skirt, dyed blue thread, and stitched a border of daisies. She pieced scrap fabric into a rainbow pattern on the hem. When the mom posted a photo of her daughter blowing out candles in the dress, she captioned it, "Prettier than any starlight gown made with love." Orders flooded in, keeping Ella busy from dawn till dusk. George cleared half his garage for her to use as a studio. Women from the community stopped by to help. Some taught her traditional patchwork, others ironed fabric. Ella knew this was just the beginning. She had so much more to prove. Brooklyn Mender grew so popular that the New Yorker reached out for an interview. When the reporter visited, Ella was embroidering a denim jacket, while George sanded leather buttons nearby. "Your designs feel so rooted in Brooklyn's soul, nothing like the glossy luxury brands," the reporter said. "Have you thought about turning this into a full-fledged brand?" Ella set down her needle. "I want to, but I don't have the resources yet. And I don't want to follow the traditional fashion brand playbook. I want to do sustainable fashion, using upcycled materials and traditional crafts to make clothes that feel accessible, not out of reach." After the interview ran, Ella's orders tripled. She rented a small storefront next to the garage, fixed it up simply, and opened Brooklyn Mender as a physical shop. On opening day, neighbors filled the street. George gave her a hand-carved wooden sign, etched with Kohl's Tailor Shop, her grandmother's old name, and a smaller line, Ella S. Mender Haven. Just as Ella's business found its footing, trouble struck. Starlight Group sent her a lawyer's letter, accusing her of copying Olivia Payne's design aesthetic. They demanded she shut down Brooklyn Mender immediately and pay $1 million in damages. Ella's hands shook as she read the letter. She knew it was Olivia's revenge, fear that Ella might threaten her success. She consulted several lawyers, but all refused to take her case, intimidated by Starlight's power. That night, Ella sat in the studio, staring at her grandmother's sewing machine. A knock at the door jolted her. A woman with short hair, wearing a black leather jacket, stepped in. Ella Cole, she asked, handing over a business card, asterisk, Maya Rodriguez, independent fashion journalist, asterisk. Yes, Ella said warily. What do you want? I want to help you, Maya said bluntly. I've been investigating Olivia Payne. This isn't her first time stealing designs. 3 years ago, she copied a niche designer's knitwear line and ran them out of business. Last year, she stole her assistant's graduation collection and fired her for speaking up. Ella froze. Why would you help me? Because I hate people who climb the ladder by stealing other people's hard work, Maya said, sitting across from her. And I have proof Olivia stole your design. I found footage of you presenting your heritage sketches at Parsons. I also have receipts from your grandmother's shop showing you bought the fabric for the gown months before Olivia claimed she designed it. Ella's eyes lit up. Really? Can we win this? It won't be easy, Maya sighed. Starlight has the best legal team in New York, and Olivia already copyrighted your design. We need harder evidence, like a recording of her admitting to the theft, or proof she forged that authorization in your notebook. I know someone who can help, Ella said suddenly. She thought of Lilo, Olivia's former assistant. Leela had been fired the previous year for questioning the originality of Olivia's designs, labeled insubordinate. Ella had met her once during graduation show preparations. She'd seemed honest. Maya tracked Lila down through her contacts. At first, Lila refused to speak up, terrified of Olivia's retaliation. But when Ella showed her photos of her grandmother's shop and videos of her embroidery process, Lila relented. Olivia did steal your design, Leela said, her voice shaking as she sat in Ella's studio. After she borrowed your notebook, she locked herself in her office all night. She made me forge your handwriting for that authorization note. I was scared I didn't dare say no. Later, I found other designers' sketchbooks in her drawer sheet, tricked them out of their work too. Do you have proof? Maya asked. Leela nodded, pulling a USB drive from her bag. I secretly recorded her. The audio has her and her assistant talking about altering your design and her admitting she stole it. I copied files from her computer to evidence she faked the creation process of the gown. Ella took the USB drive, her hands trembling with excitement. This was her first step to fighting back. But she knew Olivia had Starlight behind her. To take her down for good, she needed more than just evidence. We can't stop at a lawsuit, Maya said. We need New York to see who Olivia really is. Next month, there's a sustainable fashion summit. Starlight is a sponsor, and Olivia is the keynote speaker. We'll go public with the evidence there. We'll ruin her, Ella nodded. But first, we need to make Brooklyn Mender stronger. If I'm just a small-time designer, even if I win the lawsuit, no one will truly believe me. I need my designs to speak for themselves. To show that real fashion isn't about plagiarism or hype, it's about heart. For the next month, Ella and her team worked tirelessly. She designed a new collection called Patches of Memory, using upcycled clothes and her grandmother's old fabric, piecing together patterns that told the stories of Brooklyn residents, a single mom's struggle, an immigrant family's nostalgia, a neighbor's kindness. She invited community members to model the pieces, shooting photos and videos. The day of the summit arrived. Ella walked into the venue wearing a Patches of Memory gown. Olivia was on stage speaking about innovation and originality in sustainable fashion as the crowd applauded. Ella took a deep breath and exchanged a look with Maya and Lila. It was time. Inside New York's Sustainable Fashion Summit, crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Fashion industry elites, journalists, and investors filled the seats. Olivia, in a crisp white suit, stood at the podium. Speaking confidently, true sustainable fashion is about more than eco-friendly materials. It's about originality. Every design I create honors traditional crafts and draws from life's truths. Take my heritage collection last year, for example, inspired by my grandmother's country embroidery. The crowd clapped. Starlight's CEO, sitting in the front row, smiled approvingly. Suddenly, the screen behind Olivia went black. She frowned, calling to the back. What's going on? Fix the screen. Seconds later, the screen lit up, but instead of Olivia's slides, it played footage of Ella presenting her heritage sketches at Parsons. On camera, Ella held up a sketch and explained the embroidery. This cornflower was my grandmother's favorite. She told me it stands for courage. The room erupted in gasps. Olivia's face turned pale. She screamed at the back, "Turn it off, now." But it was too late. After the video ended, audio clips from Lila's USB drive played Olivia's voice clear. Ella's design is perfect. Have someone forge her signature on an authorization note, say. She gave it to me voluntarily. Next came photos of Olivia's forged sketches, screenshots of stolen design files from her computer, and receipts from Ella's grandmother's shop dated 6 months before Olivia claimed to have dreamed up the heritage collection. Miss Olivia Payne, Ella said, picking up a microphone and standing. She walked slowly toward the stage. You claim your designs honor traditional crafts. But you stole not just my work, you stole my grandmother's legacy. You talk about originality and sustainable fashion, yet you built your career on theft. Olivia panicked, lunging for Ella's microphone, but journalists swarmed around her, cameras flashing. Ms. Payne, is it true you plagiarized Ella Cole's design? Did you steal from other designers too? Will Starlight Group take action against you? Olivia stumbled backward, unable to speak. Starlight's CEO tried to stand, but Maya blocked him, handing him a stack of papers. Mr. Payne, this is evidence of Olivia's plagiarism over the past 3 years' victim statements, financial records. I have sent it to every major outlet. You'd better start thinking about how to apologize to the public. Chaos filled the room. Olivia fled, escorted by bodyguards. Ella stood on the stage, facing the crowd. I'm not here to ruin Olivia, she said. I'm here to say that fashion shouldn't be a game of power and hype. It shouldn't be about stealing other people's passion. Real fashion, like my grandmother taught me, is about stitching stories into every seam. It's about making people feel seen, not used. She gestured to the side door. A dozen people walked in wearing patches of memory designs: elderly neighbors, single parents, immigrant entrepreneurs. Each garment told a real story. These clothes are made from upcycled materials, Ella said, made by ordinary people in Brooklyn. I want the world to see that fashion can be affordable, eco-friendly, and human. This is what Brooklyn Mender stands for, a brand for everyone. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters surrounded Ella. Investors slipped her business cards. Even designers who'd once been too afraid to speak out stood and cheered. After the summit, Ella became the talk of New York's fashion scene. Starlight Group released a statement firing Olivia, shutting down her eponymous line, and publicly apologizing to Ella. They offered her compensation, but she refused, demanding only that they admit their mistake publicly and pull all Olivia-designed products from stores. Olivia's scandal made headlines worldwide. She went from wunderkind designer to a pariah, facing lawsuits from other plagiarized designers. Soon after, Brooklyn Mender won the New York Fashion Association's Innovation Award of the Year. At the ceremony, Ella wore an altered version of her grandmother's old blouse, with tiny cornflowers embroidered on the collar. She stood on stage, looking at George, Maya, Leela, and her neighbors. This award isn't mine alone, she said. It belongs to everyone who believes in honesty and courage. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you for never giving up on me. Brooklyn Mender exploded in popularity. New Yorkers loved the designs, and customers traveled from Los Angeles and Chicago for custom pieces. Ella moved the studio from the small Brooklyn storefront to a historic Manhattan building, expanding it tenfold. She hired 20 employees, mostly Brooklyn residents, and designers who'd been pushed out of the industry. Ella never forgot her roots. She added a mending corner in the studio, offering free clothing repairs to the community. She partnered with Brooklyn thrift stores to collect old clothes for upcycling. She even taught a class at Parsons called Sustainable Fashion and Traditional Crafts, showing students how to blend eco-friendly materials with hand techniques. One day, she received an email from a young designer named Claire. Claire wrote that her niche design style had left her struggling. In the fashion industry, I'd even considered quitting. But after reading about Ella, she'd found the courage to create a collection using traditional knitting techniques from her New England hometown. She asked for Ella's advice. Ella invited Claire to the studio. When she saw Claire's designs, wool scarves and coats with the rustic beauty of New England countryside, stitched with local folk tales, she was stunned. Your work has soul, Ella said. The fashion industry is so obsessed with glitz and trends that it's forgotten how powerful simplicity and honesty can be. I want to partner with you. Let's add your knitting line to Brooklyn Mender and show the world what you can do. Claire burst into tears. Thank you. I always thought no one would care about my designs. You're giving me a chance. Ella smiled. You're earning this chance. I want Brooklyn Mender to be a platform for designers like you, talented people who've been overlooked because they don't play by the industry's greedy rules. Their collaboration was a hit. The Country Knit collection sold out across North America. European fashion buyers took notice, and soon the line was in boutiques in Paris and London. Ella didn't stop there. She partnered with designers from Mexico, Japan, and India, weaving traditional crafts like Mexican embroidery, Japanese indigo, dyeing, and Indian tie-dye into her collections. Brooklyn Mender evolved from a niche brand to a symbol of multicultural sustainable fashion. Vogue, named Ella one of the women changing New York fashion, praising her for stitching the gap between fashion and humanity and making sustainability feel like a movement, not a marketing buzzword. One day, Ella returned to Brooklyn. The space that had once been her grandmother's tailor shop and later Olivia's experience store was now empty. Starlight had closed it after Olivia's scandal, its reputation in tatters. Ella rented the space, renovated it, and reopened it as Brooklyn Mender Community Shop. She kept her grandmother's wooden counter and display shelves, hanging her grandma's photos and old customer orders on the walls. On opening day, George brought neighbors to help. Claire and her other designer partners came to. Ella stood in the doorway, watching as Cole's tailor shop and Brooklyn Mender signs hung side by side. Her heart felt full. Then, she saw a familiar figure on the street. Olivia. She looked worn, no longer glamorous, dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt. Olivia hesitated, then walked toward Ella. "I'm sorry," she said, staring at the ground, "for stealing your design, for taking the shop. I've paid all the lawsuits. I'm working at a small tailor shop now, learning to sew again. I finally get what you meant about making clothes with heart." Ella looked at her. There was no anger left, only acceptance. "The past is done," she said. "If you're serious about starting over, I can connect you to my partner factory. Start as a seamstress. But remember, making clothes is like making a life. You can't cut corners. You have to show up every day with honesty." Olivia looked up, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As Olivia walked away, Ella smiled. Her victory hadn't been about destroying Olivia, it had been about honoring her grandmother's legacy and staying true to herself. That night, Ella sat behind the wooden counter, pulling out her grandmother's singer. She pressed the pedal, and it hummed asterisk click-clack asterisks, just like old times. She picked up a needle and thread, embroidering a tiny cornflower on a scrap of denim. Outside, Brooklyn's lights twinkled warm, familiar, alive. Ella knew her story was just beginning. Brooklyn Mender would keep growing, but it would always be about more than clothes. It would be about mending what was broken hearts, communities, even an industry that had lost its way. Brooklyn Mender would keep growing, but it would always be about more than clothes. It would be about mending what was broken hearts, communities, even an industry that had lost its way. Brooklyn Mender grew beyond North America, expanding into Europe. A Paris boutique even opened a dedicated Brooklyn Mender section, drawing fashion bloggers and celebrities. But Ella's sights were set farther on Asia. She'd long been fascinated by Japanese traditional crafts, especially indigo dyeing and sashiko embroidery. Like the American country embroidery she knew, these techniques relied on patience and handwork, each stitch carrying the weight of time and craftsmanship. She decided to travel to Japan, to find artisans to collaborate with and to share her vision of sustainable fashion. Ella and Claire flew to Okayama, Japan, the birthplace of indigo dyeing. Through a local contact, they met Mr. Moriyama, a 70-year-old artisan who ran a dye house that had been in his family for 6 generations. He still used natural plant-fermented dye, dyeing fabric by hand. When Ella first met Mr. Moriyama, he was hanging indigo-dyed fabric in his courtyard. The deep blue cloth fluttered in the wind, like a quiet sea. Ella bowed respectfully. "Mr. Moriyama, I'm Ella Cole, from New York. I'm a designer. I admire your indigo dyeing craft, and I'd love to collaborate with you." Mr. Moriyama studied her, then handed her a piece of freshly dyed fabric. Ella ran her fingers over each rough, textured, alive. Nothing like the machine-dyed fabric she'd seen in stores. "Do you know how to dye cloth?" Mr. Moriyama asked, his voice gruff. "No, but I'm willing to learn," Ella said. "My designs use upcycled materials and traditional crafts. I believe good craftsmanship deserves to be preserved and shared with the world." For the next month, Ella and Claire stayed in Okayama. Learning indigo dyeing from Mr. Moriyama, they woke before dawn to prepare dye, soak fabric, and stir vats. Dyeing was tedious. Each piece of fabric needed to be dipped a dozen times to get the perfect shade. Ella's hands turned blue, stained beyond washing, but she didn't mind. Mr. Moriyama softened as he watched them work. He told Ella stories of the dye house, how his father had shielded the vats with his body during World War II when the dye house was nearly destroyed, how machine dyeing had driven most old dye houses out of business, and how he'd almost given up, but couldn't bear to let his family's legacy die. "Young people today want things fast," Mr. Moriyama sighed. "No one wants to spend time on slow crafts anymore. I'm afraid when I'm gone, this art will disappear." "It won't," Ella said. "We'll bring your craft to America, to the world. We'll show young people that slowing down, doing something with your hands, is a gift." Before leaving Okayama, Ella and Mr. Moriyama struck a deal. He would supply hand-dyed indigo fabric, and Ella would turn it into clothing that blended American design with Japanese craftsmanship. They named the collection Indigo Heritage. They also agreed to host annual exchanges. American designers would study in Okayama, and Japanese artisans would visit New York. Back in New York, Ella threw herself into designing Indigo Heritage. She made trench coats, blouses, and dresses from Mr. Moriyama's indigo fabric. Adding sashiko embroidery of the Brooklyn Bridge and Okayama streets, a symbol of cultural connection, she printed Mr. Moriyama's dye house story and the fabric's dyeing process on each garment's tag, so customers would know the work behind every piece. Indigo Heritage was a bigger hit than Ella imagined. Fashion magazines raved about it. Even UNESCO took notice, calling the collaboration a model for cross-cultural craft preservation and sustainable fashion. People were inspired by Ella's vision. They joined her Sustainable Fashion Alliance, designers, artisans, environmental groups, and everyday consumers. Together, they hosted workshops teaching mending and upcycling. They advocated for laws requiring fashion brands to disclose their supply chains. They opened mender stations around the world, making sustainable fashion accessible to everyone. One day, Ella received an email from Mr. Moriyama. It included a photo, young Japanese designers, smiling as they learned to dye fabric in his courtyard. The message read, "Ella, thank you. Now young people come to learn dyeing. The dye house is alive again. Next time you come to Okayama, I'll dye you the finest fabric." Ella smiled, tears in her eyes. She remembered her grandmother's words. A needle is small, but it can mend cracks. A craft is old, but it can bridge the future. Now, she understood. She looked out her studio window at New York's skyline. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating her design's upcycled fabric, hand-embroidered patterns, pieces that told stories. Ella knew her vengeance had ended long ago. Now, she was building something better, a world where traditions weren't forgotten, where sustainability was second nature, and where fashion felt like a hug, warm, honest, and human. It all started with a rusty sewing machine in a garage, a stubborn spirit, and a girl who refused to let her grandmother's legacy die. 5 years later, Brooklyn Mender was a globally recognized sustainable fashion brand, with stores in New York, Paris, Tokyo, and London. It employed over 200 people, half of whom were artisans from around the world. Ella, once a Brooklyn tailor's granddaughter, was now a leader in the global sustainable fashion movement. Speaking at the UN and the World Economic Forum about her vision, that year, New York Fashion Week invited Ella to host a standalone show as the closing event. She hesitated. New York Fashion Week was the industry's glitziest stage, filled with luxury and competition so different from her affordable, community-focused values. "Why not do it our way?" Claire said, sensing her doubt. "We can turn the runway into a celebration of sustainable fashion and traditional crafts. Show the world that fashion doesn't need to be about couture gowns and celebrity models. It can be real and meaningful." Ella nodded. She accepted the invitation, but on her terms. She chose not a fancy venue, but a historic Brooklyn street. She and the community cleaned it up, built a runway from recycled wood, decorated with scrap fabric, and even moved her grandmother's Singer sewing machine to the center of the space as a display. Her models weren't supermodels. They were ordinary people from around the world. A Brooklyn single mom, a young indigo dyer from Okayama, a Mexican embroidery artist, an Indian textile worker. Each wore Brooklyn Mender, designs made from upcycled materials and traditional crafts, each with a story. The show's music was written by Brooklyn musicians using recycled instruments, flutes made from old pipes, drums from discarded crates. On the day of the show, the Brooklyn street was packed. Fashion elites, journalists, celebrities, and neighbors filled the stands. When the first spotlight hit a young Japanese dyer in an indigo trench coat, the crowd fell silent. One by one, the models walked the runway. A woman in a denim skirt, upcycled from old jeans, with Mexican sun embroidery on the hem. A man in a recycled wool coat, stitched with New England country patterns. A girl in a dress made from vintage fabric, with her grandmother's pearl button at the neck. At the end of the runway, each model stopped, picked up a microphone, and told the story behind their outfit. "I'm Maria, from Mexico," one model said. "My mom taught me this. Embroidery all. The women in my village know it. Thanks to Brooklyn Mender, the world gets to see our work." "I'm Amir, from India," another said. "This fabric uses my village's traditional tie-dye once. We could only sell it locally. Now, it's in New York stores." "I'm Lucy, from Brooklyn," a single mom said. "This dress is made from my daughter's old clothes. Ella embroidered my daughter's drawings on it. It's the most precious gift I've ever had." The crowd was moved to tears. When Ella walked the runway last wearing a reimagined version of her heritage gown, the street erupted in applause. People stood, cheering. Ella stood at the end of the runway, looking at the crowd. George, Maya, Lila, Mr. Moriyama, and all the people who'd helped her. She picked up a microphone, her voice shaky but steady. "Today, I'm not here to show off fancy clothes. I'm here to show you that fashion isn't a distant dream. It's in the old clothes in your closet, in the crafts passed down by your grandparents, in the stories we share with each other. I lost everything once, betrayed by someone I trusted, misunderstood, ready to give up. But I was lucky. I had people who believed in me. Now, I want Brooklyn Mender to be that for others, a place where everyone feels seen, where crafts are celebrated, where even a simple stitch can make a difference." After the show, journalists and fans swarmed Ella. The editor-in-chief of *Vogue* shook her hand. "Ella, you've changed fashion," she said. You've shown us what it can. Be kind, responsible, human. That night, Ella and her team hosted a celebration at the Brooklyn community shop. They ate pizza, drank beer, and talked about the journey. George pulled out his guitar, playing the old country song he'd played when Ella first started. Ella smiled, watching her chosen family laugh and sing. She walked to the window, looking at Brooklyn's night sky stars, bright streetlights warm. She thought of her grandmother, of the night she'd found the singer in George's garage, of the day she'd stood up to Olivia at the summit. This wasn't the end, she realized. It was just the start. Before the Fashion Week buzz faded, Ella's office received a visit from a man in a tailored suit, Greg Hansen, a partner at Vanguard Capital, a top Wall Street investment firm. He held a thick stack of papers and investment proposal. Ms. Cole, Brooklyn Mender, has incredible potential, he said, cutting to the chase. Vanguard Capital wants to invest $50 million to help you expand to 20 cities worldwide. Build a true sustainable fashion empire. Ella's heart raced as she read the proposal. $50 million could fund Mender stations across America, support more artisans, even build a foundation to train young craftspeople. But one line caught her eye. Investors will hold 35% equity and have decision-making power over core operations, including product positioning, pricing, and supply chain management. Mr. Hansen, Ella said, setting down the proposal, our supply chain relies on artisans and upcycled materials. We keep prices affordable. That doesn't align with capital's focus on efficiency and returns. Greg smiled, leaning forward. That's where we can optimize. Replace hand dyeing with mass-produced, eco-friendly dye. Let machines sort recycled materials. Costs drop 40%, prices go up 20%, profit margins skyrocket. As for the artisans, hire them as brand consultants. Keep the traditional craft gimmick, but scale production. Ella frowned. This wasn't optimization, it was betrayal. She thought of Mr. Moriyama's calloused hands, of the Brooklyn women stitching in her studio, of the customers who loved her clothes because they felt lived in, loved. If she took the money, Brooklyn Mender would become just another brand doll hype, no heart. I need time to talk to my team, Ella said. Greg nodded, leaving his card. You have a week. Remember, opportunities like this don't come twice. That afternoon, Ella gathered her core team. Claire spoke first. $50 million. We could build dye houses in Africa. Craft schools in India help so many people. Maybe we can try partial machine production. Ease into it. Marcus, who ran supply chain, shook his head. Last month, we tested machine-sorted recycled fabric. It threw out all the imperfect pieces, like a 1970s tablecloth that would have made a beautiful dress. Machines don't see stories. Only humans do. Old George sat in the corner, twisting one of Ella's grandmother's brass buttons in his hand. Kid, when your grandma opened the shop, people told her to use cheap machine thread, said she'd get more orders. You know what she said? Machine thread is dead. Hand-stitched thread has soul. Your clothes have soul now. Machines will kill that. Ella looked around the room. That night, she visited the community shop. She watched young moms teaching their kids to embroider names on handkerchiefs. A little girl held up her work, grinning. Ella, I want to make clothes with stories too, just like you. Ella knelt down, brushing the girl's hair. She remembered sitting in her grandmother's shop, watching her stitch customers' stories into clothes. Back then, she'd never dreamed of an empire. She'd just wanted to keep her grandma's craft alive. The next day, Ella called Greg. I'm sorry, Mr. Hansen. We can't accept your investment. Brooklyn Mender isn't meant to be an empire. It's meant to be a home for artisans to thrive, for people to feel warm in our clothes. That matters more than $50 million. Greg sounded surprised, then dismissive. You'll regret this. Without capital, you'll always be a Brooklyn boutique. Ella hung up, unshaken. She and her team created a small but mighty expansion plan. No global stores instead. Partner with local artisans in each city to build community allies. They used crowdfunding to let supporters join in. People donated old clothes, offered workshop spaces, volunteered to promote the brand. To their surprise, it worked. In 3 months, Brooklyn Mender had community allies in 10 U.S. cities. Artisans in London and Tokyo reached out. Instead of mass production, each ally designed pieces that reflected local culture. London's ally turned vintage curtains into trench coats, embroidered with Big Ben. Tokyo's ally made scarves from kimono scraps, with sashiko stitching. Ella received an email from Greg. It said, "You've worked a miracle." She smiled and deleted it, then turned to a package on her desk, handwoven fabric from Kenyan artisans, who wanted to partner with her to share Maasai weaving with the world. Ella was reviewing sales reports for the Indigo Heritage Collection when she opened the package from Kenya. Inside was fabric woven from sisal fiber, dyed in bold reds and blues Maasai warrior patterns. It felt rough but strong, carrying the warmth of the African sun. A handwritten letter was tucked inside, its English shaky. Dear Ms. Ella, we are Maasai artisans from the Masai Mara. We read about you in * National Geographic *. The women in our tribe all know how to weave, but we can only sell our work at local markets. We don't make enough to feed our children. We want to partner with you. Help the world see Maasai weaving. Help our kids go to school. Signed, * Maasai Weavers Cooperative Leader Aisha *. Ella held the fabric, her throat tight. She thought of Mr. Moriyama, worried his dye house would die. Of Maria, saying her village's embroidery was finally seen. These Maasai artisans were just like them, holding on to a craft, fighting to survive. She decided to go to Kenya with Claire, who'd studied African traditional patterns. After a 12-hour flight, Ella and Claire landed near the Masai Mara. As they stepped off the plane, a group of women in red Masai shuka surrounded them. Their leader Aisha held out a woven bracelet. Welcome, friends. This is our gift for friendship. Ella put on the bracelet, its warmth seeping into her skin. Aisha led them to the cooperative's workshop, simple thatched roof huts. Inside, women sat on the ground, weaving sisal fiber into fabric. Children drew Maasai patterns in the dirt nearby. We learned to weave from our mothers when we're small, Aisha said. But young people leave for the cities now. No one wants to learn. If the craft dies, our tribe's culture dies too. Ella thought of her grandmother. She pulled out Brooklyn mender clothes, showing Aisha, these use upcycled materials. Each pattern tells a story. We want to partner with you not to change your weaving, but to share your stories. Let the world know Maasai culture through your work. Aisha's eyes lit up. For a week, Ella and Claire learned to weave from the Maasai women, and the women learned how to adapt their work for modern clothing. Ella realized Maasai weaving wasn't just for fabric. It could make belts, buttons, bags, even shoe accents. Together, they designed a collection called Heartbeat of the Savannah, sisal woven dresses with Maasai warrior patterns, and tree of life embroidery. Recycled denim jackets, paired with woven belts. Small woven bags adorned with bone beads. Before leaving, Ella and Aisha signed a contract. Brooklyn Mender would sell the cooperative's work worldwide, giving 60% of profits to the Maasai women. They'd build a new workshop in the village, hire Aisha as its manager, and bring in teachers to teach weaving and basic education to the children. I'll come back, Ella said, hugging Aisha. This isn't just a partnership, it's a promise for life. Aisha nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Ella. You've shown us our craft matters. Our culture matters. Back in New York, Heartbeat of the Savannah launched to rave reviews. Customers said wearing the clothes made them feel connected to the savannah. To the women who made them, best of all, young Maasai people started returning to the village to learn weaving proud. Their craft was celebrated worldwide. Aisha emailed Ella, the workshop is full of young weavers. The children draw patterns for new designs. You've given our tribe hope. Ella taped Aisha's email to her studio wall next to photos of Mr. Moriyama's dye house and Maria's embroidery circle. These images were the heart of Brooklyn Mender, not profits. Not fame, but artisans thriving, crafts being passed down, stories being told. It was late autumn in Brooklyn, and the maple leaves were red. Outside the Brooklyn Mender community shop, a new sign hung, a photo of Ella and her grandmother, with the words stitching past and future together. That day, a little girl in a school uniform walked in, carrying a small, rusty sewing machine. Can you teach me to use this? She asked shyly. It was my grandma's. She used it when she was young. I want to make a dress for my mom. Ella looked at the machine just like her grandmother's singer. She knelt down. Of course, every Saturday afternoon, come here. I'll teach you. The girl grinned. Thank you. I'm Leela. Someday I want to make clothes with stories like you. Ella watched Leela run out, her heart warm. She walked to the shop's display area, where she'd arranged pieces from her artisan partners, Mr. Moriyama's indigo fabric, Aisha's Maasai belts, Maria's embroidery, and the Brooklyn women's mended clothes. Each piece had a small card with the artisan's name and their story. Claire burst in, holding a letter. Ella, great news. UNESCO is giving us the Cultural Heritage and Sustainability Award. They want you to speak at the ceremony in Paris next month. Ella took the letter, her hand shaking. From being expelled and homeless to speaking at UNESCO, she owed it all to her grandmother. To George, Maya, Leela, and every artisan who trusted her. At the ceremony, Ella wore a dress that blended crafts from around the world, a skirt of Maasai woven sisal, sleeves of Mr. Moriyama's indigo, a collar embroidered by Maria, a belt of recycled leather from Brooklyn. She held her grandmother's brass button in her hand as she spoke. Today I want to tell you a story about persistence, she said. It started with a rusty sewing machine, a Brooklyn tailor's dream, and a girl who refused to give up. Now it belongs to artisans everywhere, people who keep traditions alive, who stitch heart into every piece. She told the audience about her grandmother's shop, about Olivia's betrayal, about Mr. Moriyama's dye house, Aisha's weaving cooperative, Maria's embroidery circle. People ask me, what is sustainable fashion? It's not just about eco-friendly fabric. It's about respect for cultures, for artisans, for the stories that make us human. It's Mr. Moriyama's patience, dyeing fabric one dip at a time. It's Aisha's courage, fighting to save her tribe's craft. It's every person who chooses clothes that matter. The audience erupted in applause. Delegates from around the world came to shake her hand, asking to partner with Brooklyn Mender. Back in Brooklyn, Ella hosted a craft carnival at the community shop. Artisans from across the globe attended. Mr. Moriyama demonstrated indigo dyeing. Aisha taught weaving. Maria showed embroidery. Children ran between the stalls, learning to stitch and weave. Ella sat at her grandmother's singer, watching the chaos. Leela ran over, holding a small dress. Ella, I made this for my mom. It's not perfect, but she loves it. Ella looked at the dress-crooked stitches, a lopsided sun embroidered on the hem. It was perfect. You did amazing, she said. Promise you'll keep weaving stories into clothes. Lila nodded fiercely. I promise. Just like you and my grandma. The sun set, casting gold light over the shop. Ella looked at her grandmother's machine, at the artisans laughing, at Lila showing off her dress. Her grandmother's craft wasn't just alive, it was growing. The traditions that had been nearly lost were now being passed to a new generation. Ella smiled. This was her legacy, not a fashion empire, but a family of artisans, a community of storytellers, a world where craft and kindness mattered more than profit. And it all started with a single stitch. Late autumn in New York, and wind-whipped leaves past Manhattan's skyscrapers. Ella was finishing a video call with her Tokyo artisans, organizing orders for the Heartbeat of the Savannah collection, when the studio door flew open. Claire rushed in, holding a newspaper, her face pale. Ella, look. The front page headline screamed Zara launches affordable, sustainable line, targeting Brooklyn's niche brands The photo showed Zara's window display. Indigo shirts nearly identical to Brooklyn Mender's, with the tag reading eco-friendly, handmade and a price a third of. Ella's fingers tightened around the paper. She pulled up Zara's website. There it was, the sustainable collection, copying her aesthetic, even stealing Maasai warrior patterns. But Zara's marketing claimed the designs were inspired by European vintage crafts. Worse, Zara's Manhattan flagship had a giant billboard, real sustainable fashion, no need to pay for sentiment, a direct jab at Brooklyn Mender's pricing and values. They're plagiarizing us outright, Marcus yelled, slamming his fist on the desk. We fought so hard to get Maasai weaving recognized then. They just call it European inspiration. It's disgusting. Ella said nothing, pulling up Zara's financial reports. The brand's sales had dropped 20% in the past quarter. Its stock was falling. Sustainable fashion was trending, and Zara was desperate to cash in while crushing small brands like hers. We can't sit back, Ella said, taking a deep breath. Zara has capital and stores. We have community and artisans. That afternoon, Ella posted a video on social media. She held up Zara's shirt next to Aisha's Maasai woven fabric, showing the identical patterns. Then she played footage of Aisha and the Maasai women weaving, explaining the warrior pattern's meaning, a symbol of the Maasai's fight to protect their homeland, each stitch tied to the tribe's history. Sustainable fashion isn't a label or a copied design, Ella said, looking into the camera. It's respecting cultures, paying artisans fairly, and letting customers know they're buying more than a shirt, they're supporting a community. Zara can steal a pattern, but they can't steal the story behind it. They can't give Aisha's village the hope that weaving brings. In 2 hours, the video was shared 100,000 times. Artisans Ella had helped, customers who loved her clothes, even strangers all spoke up for her. Maria posted a video of her village's embroidery circle, captioning it, "Our stitches come from our mothers, our grandmothers, not European inspiration." Mr. Moriyama and his apprentices stood outside Tokyo Zara, holding signs how indigo dye made by artisans, not machines. Brooklyn residents handed out Brooklyn Mender artisan storybooks outside Manhattan's Zara, telling shoppers the truth. To Ella's surprise, the New York Times reached out for an interview. The article exposed Zara's sustainable lies. Its handmade pieces were outsourced to sweatshops. Its eco-friendly fabric was just 10% recycled. It had paid nothing to the Maasai or other cultures whose designs it stole. The article contrasted Zara's supply chain with Brooklyn Mender's. 60% of profits went to artisans. Materials were fully traceable. Every piece came with an artisan's story. Public opinion flipped overnight. Customers boycotted Zara's fake sustainable line. Store sales plummeted, and its stock dropped another 15%. Zara CEO was forced to apologize publicly, pull the line, and promise compensation to the Maasai cooperative and other affected cultures. Brooklyn Mender's orders tripled. Customers left comments. "We'll pay more for real sustainability for respect." After the dust settled, Ella hosted a real sustainability workshop at the community shop. Aisha flew from Kenya, wearing a Maasai shuka and holding ZARAS compensation check. "We're using this to build a weaving school," she said, smiling, "so more children can learn our craft and go to school." Ella looked around at the crowd, artisans, customers, neighbors. This wasn't her victory alone. It was proof that when people stood up for what was right for artisans, for stories, for respect, they could beat even the biggest corporations. After the Zara crisis, Ella focused on mentoring young artisans. She realized the biggest threat to traditional crafts wasn't fast fashion, it was disillusioned young people who saw no future in old-fashioned work. During a trip to New England, she met Lillian, a 19-year-old who knew traditional wool knitting. The last person in her town who did. Lillian's grandmother had been a famous knitter, supporting her family with hand-woven blankets. But with fast fashion, no one wanted to pay for handmade wool goods. After her grandmother died, Lillian stored her knitting frames in the attic, working at a grocery store to make ends meet. "I love knitting," Lillian said, staring at her feet, "but I can't make a living from it. My friends say it's old-fashioned, that I'm wasting my time." Ella looked at Lillian's rough, warm wool swatches. She saw herself young, doubting her craft, afraid of being left behind. She took Lillian to Brooklyn Mender's studio, showing her how young designers blended traditional knitting with modern fashion, how customers lined up for pieces with heart. "Crafts aren't old-fashioned," Ella said. "They're timeless. The trick is connecting them to today's life. Your wool is warm, durable, full of texture, perfect for scarves, hats, even jacket linings. Young people love vintage and authentic. Your work is both." Ella helped Lillian launch a New England wool collection. They simplified her grandmother's traditional diamond patterns into sleek geometric designs, mixed her grandmother's thick wool with recycled fine wool to make lighter, more wearable pieces. Ella had Lillian embroider L&G Lillian and Grandma on each piece, with a tag telling their story. When the collection launched, Ella started a social media campaign called My Craft Story, encouraging Lillian to share her journey from doubting her craft to embracing it. The response was overwhelming. A college student commented, "My grandpa's a carpenter. I always thought his work was old. Now I see it's art." Hundreds of young people posted photos of their family's craft, sewing, woodworking, pottery with the hashtag crafts worth saving. Lillian's collection sold out. Hollywood celebrities wore her scarves. A New England boutique asked her to open a pop-up. One day, a little girl pulled on Lillian's sleeve at the community shop. "Can you teach me to knit? I want to make something for my grandma." Lillian smiled. "Come back tomorrow. I'll teach you." Soon, Lillian opened a small knitting studio in New England, teaching a dozen young apprentices, college students, stay-at-home moms, teens who'd lost their way. She partnered with local schools to teach traditional knitting classes. "Ella, thank you," Lillian said, in a video call. "You showed me that Trancheng, passing down craft isn't about clinging to the past. It's about letting it grow. Now, when I see my apprentices knitting, I know Grandma's craft will live on." Ella smiled. She'd learned that saving crafts wasn't about forcing young people to preserve the past. It was about showing them how crafts could enrich the present. One young artisan at a time, one stitch at a time, legacy was being reborn. As Brooklyn Mender grew, Ella received messages from artisans worldwide. Indian textile workers pushed out by fast fashion factories. Italian leather workers whose family shops were closing because young people wouldn't learn the craft. Brazilian indigenous artists whose fabric patterns were stolen by luxury brands with no compensation. Ella realized she couldn't help everyone alone. She gathered her court, Team Claire Marcus, Aisha, Mr. Moriyama. Marie Anne proposed the Global Artisan Alliance, a network connecting traditional artisans, sustainable fashion designers, and fair trade groups. They'd share resources, protect crafts, and fight for artisans' rights. The alliance's mission was simple. Protect traditional crafts, pay artisans fairly, promote real sustainable fashion. They planned to build an artisan database, so customers could buy directly from creators, set fair craft standards to ensure brands treated artisans ethically, open online and in-person craft academies to teach young people traditional skills, and create a cultural protection fund to help artisans sue for copyright theft. The alliance launched to global acclaim. In a month, 200 artisan groups from 30 countries and 50 designer brands joined. UNESCO sent a letter praising it as an innovative model for craft preservation and sustainable development. But challenges came fast. First, funding. Running the alliance, building academies, and funding the protection fund cost millions. Ella refused corporate investment, so she used Brooklyn Mender's profits and launched a crowdfunding campaign. To her surprise, customers donated generously. One even auctioned a 1920s hand-embroidered gown, raising $100,000 for the fund. Then, cultural clashes. Artisans from different countries had different work styles. Indian textile workers wanted to produce quickly, paid by the piece. Italian leather workers insisted on slow craftsmanship. A single bag took a month. Once, an American brand ordered fabric from India and leather from Italy, demanding delivery in 2 months. The Indians delivered on time. The Italians finished only half. The brand threatened to leave the alliance. Ella flew to Italy, talking to the leather workers. "We make leather for quality, not speed," said Giuseppe, an elderly artisan. "If we rush, we ruin our work. Better to close than to make bad bags." Ella understood. She talked to the American brand, explaining, "You're not buying mass-produced goods. You're buying art. Let's extend the deadline or deliver in batches. Give the artisans time to do it right." The brand agreed. Ella created a flexible partnership model for the alliance, setting different timelines based on craft complexity, and requiring brands to learn about artisans' cultures before partnering. Worst of all was pushback from fast fashion and counterfeiters. After the alliance launched, fast fashion brands poached artisans with low wages. Counterfeiters copied the alliance designs, selling cheap knockoffs. To fight back, Ella and the alliance created an artisan certification system. Every alliance artisan got a unique code, stitched into their work. Customers could scan it to see the artisan's story, the craft process, and the material's origin. The alliance hired a legal team to help artisans sue counterfeiters for free. In one case, a Chinese factory was mass-producing fake Maasai woven scarves. Ella worked with local fair trade groups to gather evidence. Aisha recorded a video explaining the warrior pattern's cultural meaning. The Chinese government shut down the factory, and the owner paid compensation to the Maasai cooperative. Aisha posted a video bowing deeply. "Thank you, Alliance. Thank you for helping us. Now, our weaving feeds our families and the world respects our culture." The alliance grew stronger. More customers sought certified pieces. More brands joined. More young people learned crafts. Ella knew the road was long, but as long as artisans stood together, they could protect their legacy. Snow fell softly over Brooklyn the week before Christmas. Ella was cleaning the community shop's attic when she found a dusty wooden box, her grandmother's old photo album. Inside were black and white photos, her grandmother, young and smiling, standing outside Cole's tailor shop in a dress she'd made. Her grandmother, with a customer, who wore a wedding gown stitched with cornflowers. Her grandmother, teaching neighborhood kids to embroider, their small hands covered in thread. Ella flipped through the pages, tears falling. Tucked in the back was a crumpled sketch and unfinished children's gown, with cornflowers embroidered at the neck and a ruffled patchwork skirt. A note read, "Asterisk for Ella's 6th birthday. Didn't have time to finish. Asterisk." Ella's heart ached. When she was 6, her grandmother had a heart attack and was hospitalized. She'd missed Ella's birthday. After that, her health declined, and she never picked up the needle again. The gown was her grandmother's unfinished dream and Ella's unspoken regret. Looking at the sketch, Ella had an idea. She gathered her team. "This Christmas, let's launch unfinished gifts, turning forgotten, half-done crafts into clothes for kids in need." The team loved it. They posted a call on social media. "Share your unfinished handmade pieces, half-knit sweaters, unembroidered handkerchiefs, incomplete toys. We'll finish them. With love." Thousands responded. A single mom sent a half-finished baby blanket with a xiaoxiong teddy bear stitched halfway. "I started it when I was pregnant, but work got too busy. My baby's 3 now." An elderly man sent a notebook of unfinished children's clothing sketches. "My wife drew these. She wanted to make clothes for orphans, but she passed away before she could." Ella and the alliance artisans finished each piece. Maria and her sisters added sunflowers to the baby blanket. Giuseppe and his apprentices made tiny leather jackets from the wife's sketches, embroidering love on the sleeves. Ella finished her grandmother's gown, making a dozen copies with recycled fabric, each skirt a patchwork of colorful scraps. On Christmas Day, Ella and the team visited a Brooklyn orphanage. When they handed out the unfinished gifts, the kids' eyes lit up. A little girl twirled in Ella's grandmother's gown. "It's like magic," she said. The single mom cried when she saw her daughter hugging the finished blanket. "Thank you for finishing what I started," she said. The elderly man held Ella's hand. "My wife would be so happy." Her dreams came true. Ella realized the unfinished gown wasn't a regret, it was a gift. It taught her that craft was about more than skill. It was about passing on love, even when you couldn't finish the work yourself. Brooklyn Mender had never been about revenge. It had always been about mending what was broken, connecting people, honoring the past, and giving hope for the future. That night, Ella posted a photo of the album and the finished gown on social media. Caption: "Some love is late, but never lost. Thank you to everyone who turned unfinished into whole." Olivia commented, "Well done, Ella." Ella smiled. She knew Olivia was working as a seamstress at a small shop, learning to make clothes honestly. Anger was gone, replaced by peace. They'd both found their way. in their own time. 10 years later, spring bloomed in Brooklyn, and cherry blossoms lined the streets. Brooklyn Mender had grown from a garage studio to a global leader in sustainable fashion. The Global Artisan Alliance had 800 artisan groups and 200 designer brands from 50 countries, touching millions of lives. That year, Parsons invited Ella to give the graduation speech. Standing on the campus where she'd been expelled, looking at the young faces, she thought of the desperate girl who'd been called a plagiarist, who'd lost everything. 10 years ago I stood here feeling broken, she said. Betrayed by a friend, stripped of my dream, convinced the world was against me. But I learned something. Loss isn't the end. It's a chance to start over more true to yourself. She held up an indigo shirt, embroidered with Maasai patterns and Mexican suns. This shirt was made by Mr. Moriyama in Japan, Aisha in Kenya, Maria in Mexico. It's not just cloth, it's a bridge between cultures, between past and future, between what was lost and what was found. She told them about her grandmother's sewing machine, about the alliance, about the artisans who'd turned craft into hope. Fashion can be glamorous or simple, expensive or affordable, but real fashion, good fashion, has heart. It respects the hands that make it. It honors the stories that shape it. It leaves the world a little better than it found it. After the speech, students crowded around her, asking how to balance passion and practicality, how to keep crafts alive. Ella answered every question just as George, Maya, and others had done for her. As she left Parsons, she stopped at the bulletin board. A poster for the Global Artisan Alliance hung there. Looking for dreamers who love crafts and kindness. Let's change the world, one stitch at a time. Students stood around it, talking excitedly. Ella smiled. The spark had spread. Back in Brooklyn, the community shop was packed. Aisha had brought Maasai children, who held small woven baskets. Mr. Moriyama and his apprentices had brought fresh indigo fabric. Maria and her sisters sang Mexican folk songs, wearing their embroidery. George sat in the corner playing his guitar. Ella, we have a surprise, Claire said, pulling her inside. On the wall hung a giant patchwork quilt teach piece from a different alliance artisan. Kenyan savanna scenes, Japanese cherry blossoms, Mexican deserts, Brooklyn streets. Every stitch told a story. Aisha made it tall. The artisans helped, Claire said. For 10 years of friendship, for everything you've done. Ella looked at the quilt, tears streaming. 10 years from revenge to redemption, from loneliness to family. She hadn't built an empire. She'd built something better, a family of artisans, a movement of kindness, a world where craft and heart mattered most. That night, Ella sat at her grandmother's singer, watching Brooklyn's lights. She picked up a piece of fabric and started stitching a tiny cornflower. The machine hummed asterisk, click-clack asterisk, just like old times. She knew the story wasn't over. New artisans would join. New challenges would come. New young people would pick up needles and thread. But as long as there were people who cared, who stitched love into every seam, the spark would never die. This was Ella Cole's vengeance. Not destroying her enemy, but building a life more beautiful than she'd ever imagined. A life that honored her grandmother, lifted up others, and proved that even the smallest stitch could change the world. And that she thought as she finished the cornflower was the greatest craft of all. Early summer in Brooklyn. Sunlight filtered through the windows of the Brooklyn Mender community shop, casting dappled patterns on the floor. Ella was reviewing orders for the Heartbeat of the Savannah collection bound for Europe when Marcus burst in, clutching an inspection report, his face ashen. Ella, we have a problem. A batch of Maasai woven belts we shipped to Paris got seized by local customs there, calling the craftsmanship substandard. Ella took the report, her brow furrowing. The document cited uneven weaving density, minor pattern inconsistencies, and failure to meet mass production standards. She immediately FaceTimed Aisha, whose expression turned guilty on screen. I'm sorry, Ella, we've had so many orders lately. The young artisans in the tribe wanted to speed things up. They used simplified weaving techniques, even printed the patterns on the fabric instead of stitching them by hand. Hanging up, Ella fell into thought. 2 years since the alliance launched, its size had ballooned, and orders were pouring in, but similar issues were cropping up everywhere. Just last week, Giuseppe in Italy had called to say his apprentices were using glue instead of traditional leather stitching to meet deadlines. Maria's team in Mexico had even started passing off printed fabric as hand-embroidered. Hanging up, Ella fell into thought. 2 years since the alliance launched, its size had ballooned, and orders were pouring in, but similar issues were cropping up everywhere. Just last week, Giuseppe in Italy had called to say his apprentices were using glue instead of traditional leather stitching to meet deadlines. Maria's team in Mexico had even started passing off printed fabric as hand-embroidered. This isn't a craftsmanship issue, it's a problem of forgetting why we started, Ella said at an emergency alliance video call, addressing artisan representatives from 30 countries. We built this alliance not to cash in on handmade as a gimmick, but to protect real craft. to let every artisan earn a decent living through their skills, to show consumers the sincerity behind each piece. If we cut corners for efficiency, we're no better than the fast fashion brands we fight against. The call grew heated. Young artisan reps complained, handmaking one piece takes a day. Machines do it in an hour. Clients only care about price and delivery times. Who notices if it's handmade? But the older artisans stood firm. Craft is craft. Cutting corners ruins our reputation. What our ancestors passed down isn't just technique, it's the heart in every stitch. Ella knew forcing everyone to stick to 100% handmade wasn't realistic. Artisans needed to earn a living. But she also knew the alliance would lose its soul if it abandoned core traditional techniques. She decided to visit each troubled region, talk to the artisans face to face, and find a middle ground. Her first stop was Kenya. In the Maasai weaving workshop, young artisan Kama gestured at piles of orders. Helpless. Ella, we want to make things by hand, but we can't keep up. Clients call every day, yelling about delays. We have families to feed. Instead of scolding, Ella sat down and wove with Kama. She taught him how to optimize traditional techniques without sacrificing quality, breaking complex warrior patterns into basic modules for team collaboration, pre-dyeing thread with local plant dyes to cut down on waiting time. She also reached out to the Paris buyers, explaining the uniqueness of handmade crafts and convinced them to add a note on each product tag, partially handmade, each piece one of a kind. To her surprise, the imperfect pieces attracted more customers drawn to their authenticity. In Italy, Ella spent time in Giuseppe's leather workshop. She realized his apprentices avoided traditional stitching, not because they didn't care, but because they saw it as outdated. Ella asked Giuseppe to demonstrate traditional stitching. Look, leather stitched this way lasts 10-20 years. She helped the workshop launch a social media account where apprentices posted videos of the stitching process. Comments poured in. Now I see why it's worth the wait. This is art, not just a bag. 3 months later, the alliance rolled out tiered craft standards, core techniques, Maasai weaving, Italian leather stitching, Japanese indigo dyeing must remain handmade, with the alliance providing technical support and order coordination to ensure artisans work with heart, not haste. Auxiliary steps, simple cutting. Basic printing could use machines asterisk as long as asterisk environmental standards were met and quality wasn't compromised. Most importantly, Ella launched the Craftsmanship Story project within the alliance. Every artisan could share their process and personal story on product pages and social media. Customers weren't just buying clothes, they were buying the heart behind them. Data showed sales of products with tiered standards and artisan stories rose 20%, while return rates dropped 50%. Ella looked into Kama's eyes, relieved. She knew cracks in standards couldn't be fixed with rules. Alone artisans needed to understand. Tradition wasn't a chain, it was a foundation. Heart wasn't a burden, it was our greatest strength. And this is Ella Cole's revenge, not to bring down her opponent, but to live her life as she wishes, illuminating the path of more people with love and perseverance. This is also the most precious craftsmanship her grandmother taught her back then.